Hello everyone, Pixlr here. I've been meaning to make a video about this for like the past 2 to 3 weeks now, so I guess now is as good a time as any, so long as I still remember the issues I had at the start when I was using Linux. Now, Linux is not entirely new to me. I've always been fascinated by like the open computers mod from back then, as well as just being forced to use it every now and then during my time studying with certain hardware. Now, to be honest, I had no clue about Linux to like a big grand degree. I've always just heard it here and there. I've used it a few times. I've heard of a few different distros, but I never actually thought about like changing anything on my end. But as time would have it, over the many years, I gradually heard more and more about the dumpster fire that Windows 11 was gonna just become, like failing disk drives and just generally taking forever to start anything. Considering I was staying on Windows 10 for the whole time until the bitter end, I have decided on one day that I would just grab my old laptop and go right ahead and install Debian on it. And I'm talking like a complete reinstall. I completely wiped Windows off of that laptop and I already had my first issues. I already had to reinstall it again because I set up the wrong network configuration, so it just wouldn't do anything. Fantastic. But after that, when I was actually done installing it, surprisingly, it felt almost perfect. Now, of course, starting off, it wasn't gonna be like 100% perfect. Like, I had just backed up everything to a different drive, and now I have to actually pull it back and set up the whole system. But after doing all of that, it felt basically almost right back at home with like slightly different apps and everything else. All in all, I have to say that was probably the smoothest transition I could have possibly hoped for. But obviously, that was not the end of it. Because now that I was given a taste of freedom, I wanted more. I wanted to make the system truly mine. And well, things started off rather mundane in that regard. I sort of went backwards to try and figure out how I could get my Spotify visuals to sync to the desktop background, which was like, I don't know, maybe like an afternoon of trying to figure it out, as well as some slop coding, just so I could have something running. But obviously, that was not going to be the end of it, because sometime down the line, I eventually stepped into a trap that is called the Tiling Window Manager, Hyperland. Yes, I fell right into that, and I just decided, you know what, I had to do it. So ultimately, a lot of the time I was meant to study, I instead spent trying to get my Hyperland to look exactly the way I wanted to look. It was, well, it's dumb, but it looks pretty now, okay? It looks pretty. It's worth it, I swear. That being said, though, it's honestly just amazing what it lets you do. Like Windows, if you just wanted to get rid of the useless Internet Explorer, it would immediately scream right back at you. And if you had to change any sort of setting that was not within its like predefined like setup, like a very specific system config file or some other internal configuration, it was such a bad UI. I hate that it's not a I hate that it's not a file, a configuration file. But if you want to do any of that on Linux, well, no problem. You want to loop back the output audio right back into your input so you can have an instantaneous ear destroyer? Yes, you can. You want to change the bootloader so it plays the freedom motive on startup just so you can flex on some other people? What is this bull? Yeah, you can also do that. You want to just go ahead and trash your entire system right there and right now? Stop. You do know what you're doing, right? Yeah? Okay. Now, as you've probably heard out of my rambling from before, I did decide to go use Debian. Because, for one, up to this point, that was pretty much the only Linux OS I have ever actually touched on. So I was already a little familiar with it. I mean, sure, I could have used anything else. There was Fedora maybe, Arch, Ubuntu, Mint, God knows what, Gentoo. But no, like, there's nothing wrong with Debian at its core. The fact that it never updates basically means that if you install it somewhere, it's going to be a very stable and functional system. But that was going to be a problem for a slightly different reason. And if you know anything about NVIDIA, well, I think you can already tell where this is about to go. About 3 weeks ago, I decided to finally go ahead and install Debian on my main computer as a dual boot system. For that, I sliced my M2 holding the Windows 10 in half and installed Debian on the other one, just like that. Originally, I thought I was just going to swap between both Windows and Linux as necessary. But I have basically been daily driving Linux at this point, and sparing a few games, it basically runs perfectly well now. Well, if you exclude the first week of me actually trying to get the shit to run. By default, Debian comes with the Novore driver, which is basically an open source NVIDIA driver, which apparently sucks. Hard sucks. So I knew I was going to have to go and replace this with the proprietary NVIDIA driver. Go ahead, sue me, I don't care. So I went straight to the Debian repository and grabbed the driver version they recommended, version 550. And, well, this is kind of where the problem started happening. First of all, Discord just wouldn't let me screen share at all. Like, the screen sharing would just break right away. Secondly, the whole application that I needed for my PNG tiering shenanigans just didn't. I started up the server exactly as the guide said, and it just stopped working. I tried to do a lot of different things, a lot of random bullshit that I don't even remember right now, but ultimately I came to a conclusion that the problem is an outdated driver. So I went back to a Debian repository and checked for the latest version. Turns out that is exactly where the Debian issues begin, because the latest driver that is offered is 550, and I looked around, I checked the repository all the way into the unstable branch. They're on version 555. So, knowing the official repository was not gonna be my friend, I decided to just go ahead and grab the latest version from the NVIDIA website itself. I ran it and I tried to get it to run, and initially it just wouldn't. So anyway, after doing like a bunch of voodoo shit for like an entire day and just trying my hardest to get it to run, eventually it did. All the way until I had to install a new kernel. Because at that point, the kernel just decided to not update completely, just kind of break like halfway through, and because it broke halfway through, that means I couldn't install anything else. So after spending another half eternity just to try and get that running, I ultimately came to a conclusion that what I have to do now is uninstall the driver, complete the updates, and then reinstall the driver every time. Now, there might be an easier solution, but to be honest, I cannot be fucked anymore. So, we got the latest version of the driver. You think that's the end of the problems? Nope! Because now that the application would finally no longer crash, I finally could continue to a next step in the process, which was actually plugging the output of the video into OBS. And then OBS crashes on me! So then I spent another half eternity to try and go ahead and see what I could do to fix OBS, just to finally give up and go ahead and install the Flatpak. I fucking hate myself. But luckily that finally worked, so now I can finally go ahead and stream some Starbound, right? Well, fuck you! Because as it turns out, when I try to launch Starbound by default, like the Linux thing, it just makes the whole game flicker like mad. So I go ahead and enable VSync because I knew this was basically the thing that was supposed to fix this. And now as it turns out, every time the game freezes, and if you know Starbound, that game freezes like every 5 seconds, the entire screen goes black. So I spent several more hours trying to fix that, just to realize it was running on an X window for the entire time. Just because I was in a Wayland capacitor. Well, considering I guess I got that working, I decided that next up I should probably see if I could get Warframe running. And well, no, fuck you! Go ahead and install some 32-bit compatibility libraries that the whole thing forgot to install. Just because the launcher needs it, not even the game itself, the fucking launcher! I genuinely think if I kept talking about this, I think it would be here all day. Like, oh my god. Ultimately though, I decided to not drop Debian or Linux just because of all of these problems, and instead actually invested the time to try and fix it and get it running. To be honest, at this point, I like it a lot. Like, I'm not saying it's perfect by any means, no, far from it. There's still a lot of like compatibility issues with different applications. Sometimes some programs just kind of decide to do things that are entirely out of my controls. And a lot of games just don't support Linux. I'm looking at you, Valorant. Stop using your kernel anti-cheat, goddammit, embrace the TF2. But considering Microslop is not going to be again any better anytime soon, if you've been thinking about switching to Linux, right now is probably one of the best times possible. After all, remember, the more Linux users we have, the more likely it is that the actual developers are going to start taking Linux seriously as a possible gaming platform. Now, just to be clear, I don't want to say all of this just because I hate Windows. Honestly, I also want Windows to be good. And right now, the only way I think that we can see Windows getting any good is by causing some competition. Because remember, when there's competition amidst the market, the ones who are winning are gonna be us, the customers. If your competition is a free and open source software, you better have a damn good reason why your software should be paid. My personal recommendation, if you're still on the fence about installing Linux, go ahead and set up dual booting. It is not as scary as it sounds. All you need is a disk big enough to support 2 operating systems, although Linux is usually much smaller than Windows, and just a little bit of time to actually follow a tutorial and get things set up properly. If you're willing to invest a little bit of time into this OS, you can make it truly yours, which I think is probably the best thing you could possibly have. Oh, and by the way, fuck you. Forced elitism is overrated.